Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the hardware. Yesterday we spoke about the software. Today is all about the hardware. Alright, let's look at the processor. Now the processor is kind of the main piece of hardware that the machine uses to do all the functionality. There's a few bits and pieces that it requires for everything to work properly though. The processor clips into the motherboard, as does everything else. Then you have memory and hard drive storage as well. Those are the key components of the computer that makes it function. Once it has power as well, then it can turn on and you can start using it. The processor is the main piece that we're going to focus on at the minute. Now there's 4 different things that you can get with the processor. Depending on what type you go for, whether it's Intel or AMD, they usually have an equivalent for each brand. So you'll have in the Intel range an i3, which is the base level, then you have an i5, then you have an i7, and now you've got an i9. Now the difference in the way that these work, the number on the processor tells you how many things that the computer can do at once. That's called hyperthreading. Now, if you go for an i5 or an i7, you're kind of basically in the middle of the road territory now. If you go for an i3 and your software's all okay with that, then it should be fine. There's no reason why you can't use an i3. The only thing that you're going to notice is that if you try to do a lot more than what the software is asking for, it's going to be held back by the processor. If you stick with an i5 or an i7, you'll notice that the machine will work fine. If you need that extra little bit of power though, I recommend going the i7 or the i9. And the only reason why I say that is because you'll get that extra bit of room. When you make changes to software and you get new versions of software or new updates for Windows, you're going to notice a difference in the way that the machine operates. The updates may help things a little bit, but then if you don't have that extra room, you're going to notice that the machine's going to slow down a bit. Let's talk about the RAM. Now the RAM is the short-term memory for the computer. So while the processor is the brain, the RAM is more short-term memory. So when you open a program or any bit of software, it stays in there for a short term of time until you close it, and then it disappears out of it. This happens a lot with every piece of software that you're using, whether there's processors starting up in the background of the operating system. So it might start a network card, it might start your audio card, it might start a graphics driver, it might do a whole bunch of other things in the background that you have no idea what's going on with, but those are always short-term things. Some of them might stay on for a longer period of time. Eventually they will turn themselves off if they're not needed in the memory anymore. Now the storage is the important piece as well, because this is where everything's going to be stored to. So you've got one hard drive in the machine that usually comes with a PC. Sometimes if you're lucky you might have 2 or more, depending on the setup that's being configured on the machine. Now if you're buying this computer retail, usually you get one single hard drive. If you go to a computer store, they might ask what setup you want, whether it's just a single hard drive, maybe you want multiple hard drives so that you have a backup system basically, so if you lose a disk, it's not going to matter too much and you won't lose your data that way if you go for a RAID setup. You might go solid state, or you might go mechanical, or you might go for a hybrid, which is half mechanical, half solid state, which is an SSHD. They come in all different sizes. The more space that you have, the better for you. If you make your hard drive too small and you have your operating system on there, that's okay, that'll work. But as soon as you start to run out of space, then you'll notice that the hard drive run really slow and the computer performance will be affected by that as well. Depending on your setup and whatever the software is recommended, make sure that you give that little bit of extra room for the computer to grow. So think about Windows updates, think about software upgrades. If you plan on going to the next version of the software, make sure you've got that extra bit of room for every component inside the machine. More to do with the processor power, the RAM, and the storage space on the hard disk. If the software recommends 8 gig of RAM for the software to run properly, and you've got an i5, maybe you go for an i5 but stick 16 gig of RAM in and more storage space. So instead of having like a 1 terabyte hard drive, go for 2. It all depends on the software, the files that it saves, and how many files you have on the hard disk. If you've got lots of little files, you might find that it might take a long time for it to fill up. But if you're like me and you like to take photos and you use a camera raw, the camera raw files are a lot larger, so you're going to want more space. You might need to think about getting external drives, like a USB drive that you can plug into the computer, or maybe network attached storage, which allows you to have more devices, more storage basically, to handle all of your larger files, and they're not sitting directly on your computer that way. I hope you found this valuable. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Thanks for watching.